The first Pacific leader to address the Australian Parliament sets out a vision of a maturing relationship.
I ask you, do not give up on Papua New Guinea.
Also, Israel says no to a ceasefire and hostage deal, calling the Hamas terms delusional. An explosion before polls open leaves Pakistan on edge as votes are cast. And the beat of the drums grow louder to herald Lunar New Year. I'm Janice Petersen. This is SBS World News. Good evening. Papua New Guinea's Prime Minister James Marape has drawn a comparison to family ties in describing relations with Australia. It's the first time a Pacific Islands leader has addressed a joint sitting of Parliament. In the backdrop of deadly unrest and China's increasing moves to exert influence in the region, he's made a plea to not give up on his country.
Drawing the nation's nearest neighbour in closer, displaying alliance strength in the tussle for regional domination. A platform previously afforded to superpowers, now opened up to the first Pacific representative.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea.
One can choose friends, but one is stuck with family forever.
This address comes just weeks after deadly riots and looting in Papua New Guinea.
I ask you, do not give up on Papua New Guinea.
Acknowledging it was a former Labor leader who granted the Pacific nation independence in 1975, laying out an ambitious hope for future self-reliance.
Move PNG away from being an aid donor recipient nation to becoming a very important economic partner nation.
Finding new supporters and old friends.
We embrace each other as equals. We are there for each other as mates, especially when times are hard.
That plan extending from the Cabinet room to the rugby league field, and long-term plans to back a team in Australia's competition.
Thank you very much. Sincerely appreciate all the help.
Ahead of today's address, Papua New Guinea revealed it had been approached by Beijing for early-stage talks about a security and policing deal. Today's address providing reassurance.
Australia wants to build this future with you and secure it with you as your primary partner.
Former Pacific diplomat James Batley says the parliamentary address is a significant gesture.
By any objective measure, Australia is Papua New Guinea's most important partner, and I think that will be true for the foreseeable future.
The opposition delivering a veiled warning about China's intentions.
Find ourselves in times of emboldened autocrats who have no hesitation in using inducements, coercion and outright force against other nations to realise their zero-sum ambitions.
Following this visit, Prime Minister Marape returns home where he's facing the looming prospect of a vote of no confidence next week.
I think they are watching him very, very closely, and especially at a time when his leadership has been widely questioned within Papua New Guinea by some of his closest members of parliament who have left his government.
The PNG leader remains confident this prime ministerial duty won't be one of his last. Anna Henderson, SBS World News.
The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says a deal to pause fighting in Gaza is still possible. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected Hamas's terms on offer, saying total victory is within reach. He says the proposal would have left Israel vulnerable to attack, adding the IDF is going to expand its operations.
This was Rafah last night. Israel struck a residential building and a car. 20 people were killed, another 20 injured. The war has driven more than half of Gaza's population of 2.3 million people into Rafah and surrounding areas, according to the UN. A separate strike in nearby Khan Yunis killed 14. But Antony Blinken was determined to remain optimistic.
While there are some clear non-starters in Hamas's response, we do think it creates space for agreement to be reached. And we will work at that relentlessly until we get there.
He was speaking after he met with the leader of the Palestinian Authority in West Bank. He told them the US still believes in a two-state solution, which Israel's leader opposes.
I haven't seen him in a long time. Yeah, a few weeks.
Benjamin Netanyahu is doubling down, offering a categorical rebuke of Hamas's terms, saying total victory was within reach.
אנחנו בדרך לניצחון מוחלט. הניצחון הוא בהישג יד. זה לא עניין של שנים או עשרות שנים, זה עניין של חודשים.
Hamas dismissed that declaration as, quote, a form of political bravado. From Beirut, news that a Hamas delegation will travel to Cairo tonight to pursue ceasefire talks with mediators Egypt and Qatar. But in the meantime,
كما ندعو مجاهدين من كل فصائل المقاومة في كتائب القسام وسرايا القدس وكل الأجنحة العسكرية المجاهدة إلى الاستمرار في المواجهة والتزام الحيطة والحذر من غدر هذا الاحتلال.
Former hostages also sought to pressure Benjamin Netanyahu to reconsider, saying that while the price is heavy, abandoning the hostages would leave a historic stain.
136 עולמות מחכים כעת במנהרה, ללא חמצן, ללא מזון, ללא מים וללא תקווה, כדי שתצילו אותם.
The Israeli Prime Minister, though, says there is only one way to win their freedom.
המשך הלחץ הצבאי הוא תנאי הכרחי לשחרור החטופים. כניעה לדרישות ההזויות של החמאס, ששמענו עכשיו, לא רק שלא תביא לשחרור החטופים, היא רק תזמין טבח נוסף.
Antony Blinken attempting to appeal to both sides.
Israelis were dehumanized in the most horrific way on October 7th. The hostages have been dehumanized every day since. But that cannot be a license to dehumanize others. The overwhelming majority of people in Gaza had nothing to do with the attacks of October 7th. And the families in Gaza whose survival depends on deliveries of aid from Israel are just like our families.
Mr. Blinken says he will again meet with the families of the hostages tonight. Gary Cox, SBS World News.
A US drone strike has killed a high-ranking commander of an Iran-backed armed group in Iraq. The Kataib Hezbollah commander, along with 2 other militia, were targeted in a car in a main strip in eastern Baghdad. Iran-backed militia officials say the commander was Wasim Mohammed Abu Bakr al-Sadi. He was in charge of the group's operations in Syria. The US has been targeting Iran-backed groups in Syria and Iraq in retaliation for a drone strike that killed 3 US troops in Jordan last month. For more, I've been speaking with Brett Bruin. He's a former US diplomat and director of global engagement at the White House and now working as the president of global consultancy firm Global Situation Room. Thanks so much, Mr. Bruin, for joining us tonight. The escalation of violence in the wider region now shows no signs of ending. What do you think, with your experience, can be done to bring this to a head?
Well, I think what Secretary Blinken is currently engaged in, the shuttle diplomacy, going back and forth between regional capitals, consulting with some of our allies. And look, there is diplomacy in the air. Different drafts of ceasefire agreements are being passed back and forth. And as you said, in my years as a diplomat, both overseas in these crisis situations, but also sitting in the White House, when you have paper moving back and forth, that's a good sign.
Where to from here for Antony Blinken then? It's his 5th visit to the Middle East. Not much in the way of progress. Has he been set an impossible task, do you think?
The urgency of what's happening in Gaza, obviously the potential of a regional conflict necessitates that Blinken and the Biden administration engage robustly. I think the real question right now is how much are they going to be able to accomplish? Is this simply putting the problem on the back burner again? Or, as some statements have suggested recently, are they really trying to work towards a two-state solution, something that is longer term in nature? The reason that Secretary Blinken is going to Riyadh, is going to Qatar, to Cairo, is because this is three-dimensional diplomacy. He's trying to apply pressure through those Arab states on Hamas, on Palestinian leaders to give, while at the same time, obviously, the US, some of our European allies, are pushing on Netanyahu.
So what do you think the US has to lose if no progress can be made in the Middle East?
Biden will pay a high political price. This is already starting to fracture his Democratic base, let alone others that he needs to win re-election. At the same time, we're seeing from Germany, from other European countries, some of the wavering in their support both for Israel, but also for the US. We cannot afford to have more daylight, more divisions between the US and its allies, and that's precisely what the conflict in Gaza has the potential to do.
That's Brett Bruin, former US diplomat and Director of Global Engagement at the White House. Republicans in the US Senate have again blocked crucial military aid for Ukraine. It's a major blow to a country already facing severe ammunition shortages. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has stepped up large-scale attacks on towns and cities, seeking to take advantage of dwindling Western support.
The people of Kyiv knew Russian bombers were on their way. They know the drill, but some were unable to take shelter.
Там ще сусіди в нас знаходяться, заблоковані в квартирах, вони лежачі. Чекаємо, поки їх виведуть.
The military says it intercepted 44 out of 64 missiles and drones that were fired, but 5 people were killed and dozens injured. Falling debris caused some of the damage, including to a high-voltage cable, knocking out power to some parts of the capital. The European Union's foreign policy chief among those caught up in the attacks.
I myself and my team will rush to the shelter in the hotel. As many thousands of Ukrainians have to be done once again. More than 40,000 times this has happened.
The attack also damaged gas pipelines in the southern port of Mykolaiv. More than 20 residential buildings were destroyed. Wednesday's barrage comes at a time of increasing uncertainty in Ukraine. Kyiv has been forced onto the defensive by superior Russian firepower.
The motion is not agreed to.
Infighting in Washington has put US aid in doubt. Now President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's preparing a major leadership overhaul. There's speculation he's about to replace the popular army commander, General Valery Zaluzhny. But Mr. Zelensky has hinted he'll go further, saying in an interview that he wants a complete reset of the government and army. It's another interview that's dominating coverage in Russia. Tomorrow, the former Fox News host, Tucker Carlson, will release an interview with President Putin, dismissed as pro-Russian propaganda by critics. But Carlson, who's frequently defended Mr. Putin and been criticised for his extreme views, says it will help people understand the Russian point of view.
2 years into a war that's reshaping the entire world, most Americans are not informed. They have no real idea what's happening in this region.
Many Western news organisations left Russia following a crackdown on the media. Requests for interviews by those that remain have been refused. Nick Wells, SBS World News.
Still to come, votes being cast in Pakistan in an election rocked by violence. Also, a police shootout on the streets of Haiti. Also, Cambodia's leader praises Thailand for keeping protesters away from his visit. And from one extreme to another, what can we learn from Australia's summer of wild weather? Voting is underway in Pakistan's general election. The result will determine who will lead the country for the next 5 years. The winner will inherit an economic crisis, political upheaval and militant threats. Hours before the polls opened, 2 blasts in Baluchistan killed at least 28 people.
Chaos and carnage ahead of Pakistan's national elections. IS claiming responsibility for 2 bomb attacks in Baluchistan, tightening nerves in a country that is already on edge. Their intended political victims remaining defiant.
लेकिन हम इंशाल्लाह वही आज़म रखते हैं और ये आज़म बरकरार रखते हैं और इंतखाबी मुहिम के लिए हम इंशाल्लाह भरपूर फिर भी कोशिश करेंगे जितने भी धमाके हो जाए लेकिन हमारे आज़म जो हिट उठता है इंशाल्लाह उन धमाकों से ऐसे हालात से हमारे आज़म ख़राब नहीं होते।
In the capital, Islamabad, officials taking no chances with security as voters begin to cast their ballots.
There will be 6,500 police officers who will be deployed for these duties on the election day, and that has started with the transportation of the electoral material from today.
In the lead up to the elections, political tensions have also been running high. Former Prime Minister Imran Khan has been banned from running after being jailed on corruption charges, while another former PM, Nawaz Sharif, who was in prison during the last election, is vowing to turn the country around after being cleared to run. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, the son of former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, is another contender making big promises. But with the country battling an economic crisis and still recovering from floods that swept across Pakistan 2 years ago, some remain sceptical.
नई हुकूमत का भी चोर डाकू ही आएंगे दोबारा से ठीक है अपनी जेबें भरेंगे बस यही कर सकते हैं वो आवाम के लिए फ़ायदा नहीं नौजवानों के लिए फ़ायदा नहीं ना नौकरियां देते हैं सिर्फ लारे पे रखते हैं.
Results are expected to be announced by the weekend. Tim Wharton, SBS World News.
Thousands of people are fleeing violence in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. Fighting's escalated between the army and the M23 armed group. They're moving towards Goma, the biggest town in the area with a large Congolese army presence. President Felix Tshisekedi, who was re-elected in December, accuses Rwanda of providing military support to the Tutsi-led M23 rebels. The United Nations supports the claim, but Rwanda denies any involvement in the fighting. At least 6 people have been killed in a landslide that buried homes and 2 buses in southern Philippines. Dozens more were injured. The buses were picking up employees outside a gold mine when disaster struck. 45 employees of the company remain unaccounted for. 700 families in the affected areas have been evacuated. 3 Cambodian activists arrested in Thailand will not be sent home. Local authorities say they'll be resettled elsewhere. The crackdown on critics coincided with a visit by Cambodia's leader, Hun Manet, who made his first official trip over the border since becoming Prime Minister. The relationship between the 2 countries has been difficult, and this visit is designed to boost ties that have developed over recent years.
Hun Manet welcomed to Government House by the Thai Prime Minister, Seta Thavisin. It's the Cambodian Prime Minister's first visit since taking over from his father, Hun Sen, last year. He was quick to thank his hosts for ensuring his visit wasn't marred by protests.
Thanks for your reaffirming of your support that not allowing Thai territory to be used for any activities, for interference in Cambodian internal politics. The same things the Cambodian government is also give commitment of not allowing Cambodian soils as a land or for conducting activities to interfere with Thailand.
Thai authorities have been working hard ahead of Hun Manet's arrival. Pictures posted on social media show plainclothes Thai police outside the home of a prominent Cambodian dissident. He was detained hours later on immigration charges.
It's Cambodian and Thai authorities working hand in hand to crack down, to silence dissenting voices in order to deport them back to Cambodia or in order to make them disappear. And it's not just happening in Cambodia, it's happening throughout the Mekong region.
In 2020, Thai pro-democracy activist Wanchalerm Satsaksit was abducted by armed men in the Cambodian capital. He's assumed to have been killed, but neither Cambodia nor Thailand have ever disclosed the results of investigations into his abduction. The political environment in Cambodia remains deeply repressive under the new PM. Last week, opposition leader Kem Sokha had his first appeal hearing against a 27-year jail sentence for treason.
I would like to make it very clear to the international community to stop being disillusioned by Hun Manet, that Hun Manet can bring change. He will not, as long as his father is around. His father has not gone away.
For decades, Thailand was a sanctuary for political dissidents fleeing oppression inside Cambodia. But the warm welcome for Prime Minister Hun Manet indicates that has now changed, and that these are neighbours very happy to work together to silence each other's critics.
Tony Cheng reporting there. At least 5 members of a rogue security brigade have been killed in a shootout with police on the streets of Haiti's capital. The deadly exchange occurred during ongoing protests, calling on Prime Minister Ariel Henry to resign. Some witnesses say the environmental agents who were killed were defending protesters from the police. But the police union says the agents opened fire after officers ordered them to drop their weapons, prompting the shootout. More than 200 million girls and women alive today have undergone female genital mutilation. In Sierra Leone, more than 80% of women and girls have gone through it. But activists are battling to change that. And a warning that the following report has distressing details.
Across Sierra Leone, there's a hidden horror. What's happening?
We are going to Cambia, and there is an incident of a young girl that died after initiation.
We're travelling with activist Rugiatu Toure. Her life's work is ending female genital mutilation, or FGM. Traditionally, the cutting is kept secret in the initiation to the all-female Bondo society. A society that is a rite of passage for girls and young women, where they also learn valuable skills from members.
Somebody grabbed me at the back and they stripped me naked.
Toure was excited about joining the Bondo Society. When she was just 11, she learned the truth.
I felt the sharp cuts. I could not walk for 7 days because I lost so much blood. Just yesterday we got this information about this 13-year-old girl.
In the holding cells, the girl's own mother. Police arrested her, the cutter or Soe, and her grandmother. Arrests like these in Sierra Leone are extremely rare. Salomatu Jolo was just 13. Police believed she bled to death. When I went inside and saw my daughter's body, I felt devastated, says her father. I didn't feel good. I'm confused. The stench is all over here.
Why do parents still continue to subject their children to this pain? Parents that I know love their children so much, and they always protect them.
And why do they?
They looked at the cutting as being the Bondo itself.
To separate the two, Toure and her organization go village to village. She targets the Soes who are paid to cut, trains them in new skills, convincing them to put down their knives and lead bloodless Bondo ceremonies. Toure is slowly succeeding, where for decades international organizations have failed.
We will climb the mountain and all of us will be at the mountain top to say FGM has ended, and it will end in our generation as we speak.
David McKenzie with that report from Sierra Leone. The federal government's contentious industrial relations bill has tonight passed the Senate. It's taken months of negotiations. Among the changes, it'll now be easier for casual workers to switch to a full-time position, and employees will have the right to switch off after hours.
A freedom enjoyed from Paris to Rome.
La persona che stai chiamando non può rispondere al telefono.
Now becoming law in Australia.
A good day for those workers who want to be able to know that when they're on their weekend and not being paid, they can enjoy their weekend.
After securing support needed in the Senate, Labor's passed Part 2 of its Industrial Relations Bill. With the backing of the Greens and independent Lydia Thorpe, ACT Senator David Pocock the last to get over the line.
It now strikes the right balance. There's a group of workers out there who do want to be able to clock off.
Similar laws already exist in countries like France, Portugal and Chile, largely prompted by the shift to remote working after the pandemic. Australia now doing the same with its own right to disconnect law. It'll prevent employers from punishing employees for refusing to take calls or answer emails outside of work hours.
2024 is looking sunny for working people. This is a wonderful step forward.
It'll also be easier for casuals to convert to full or part-time work and give employees in the gig economy an avenue to apply for minimum standards.
If we want to, as a society, want to be able to use things like this to deliver pizzas and for convenience, the people doing that should be able to put food on their own table.
But business groups and the opposition argue the legislation overall goes too far.
They will be telling you how you run your business. And under Mr Albanese, businesses across Australia better get used to that.
With the imposition of more and more regulation, what you see is more and more cost that has to be incurred by employers.
Secure jobs and better pay might anger those opposite, but it makes a palpable difference.
After the Coalition's capitulation to changes on Stage 3 tax cuts, passing the so-called Closing Loopholes Bill is another legislative victory for the government, marking the first sitting week of the year. Pablo Vinales, SBS World News.
And in a late development tonight, Labor will have to amend the legislation next week. It's to remove a provision that could see employees face criminal charges if the new right to disconnect order is breached, after the Coalition blocked efforts to remove those penalties. The Victorian Parliament has issued a formal apology to children abused in institutional care in the decades before 1990. Victims of abuse watched on from the public gallery during a sitting of the lower house as Premier Jacinta Allen said sorry to them on behalf of current and former MPs.
You've been hurt in ways that cannot be undone and witnessed things that cannot be unseen. But I do hope that this apology can be the start of something new. For you, a start to healing, to recognition and to change. And for us, a start to saying never again and meaning it.
It's estimated 90,000 Victorian children were placed into care between 1928 and 1990 in orphanages, homes and missions run by the state or religious groups. And if this story has raised issues for you or someone you know, you can get help by calling one of these organisations. Bravehearts on 1800 272 831 or Lifeline on 13 11 14. The family of a woman missing for 5 days on the outskirts of the Victorian regional city of Ballarat has issued a tearful plea for her safe return. Samantha Murphy was last seen leaving her home around 7 a.m. on Sunday to go for a jog in the Canadian forest area of Mount Helen. An extensive ground and air search has failed to find the 51-year-old.
Mum's a really strong woman and she's far too determined to give up this fight. I know she's out there somewhere, so if you could please continue to search for her, to give us something to work with, we'd really appreciate it.
We're still maintaining hope and we're still looking for all of the relevant information to help us find some answers. At the moment, there are no suspicious circumstances that have been identified.
Police have appealed to the public to come forward with any security or dashcam vision that may help them find the mother of three. Operations at a Tasmanian nickel mine will be wound down with the falling price of the commodity blamed for the closure. It employs 200 people. The Avebury mine on the state's west coast went into voluntary administration in September and will now move into care and maintenance. The mine resumed production in September 2022 and before that it lay dormant for 13 years. The Australian Workers' Union says the employees have limited entitlements due to the short time they've been at the mine.
They are devastated by yesterday's announcement, absolutely blindsided, didn't see it coming at all, and are now very apprehensive about what their future looks like.
The Tasmanian government says it'll continue to support affected workers at the mine. 2023 was the hottest year on record for the planet, and for Australia there were wild weather events, the warmest winter and a contrast of summer weather patterns right across the country, something the Climate Council is calling climate whiplash.
From record dry and heat conditions to fatal floods, 2023 was a year of extreme weather in Australia. New reports by the Bureau of Meteorology confirm 2023 was Australia's 8th warmest year on record. But summer heat and bushfire concerns didn't quite match predictions.
Australia's climate was very much influenced by what we call the Indian Ocean Dipole. It is in a positive mode, and also El Nino. We did see more wet conditions.
Looking around the country, there were record rainfalls in Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. A deadly blaze destroyed more homes in Queensland than in 2019 and 2020 Black Summer. Gippsland in Victoria had an early fire season, followed by extreme rainfall and flash flooding. South Australia, Tasmania and Victoria recorded record rainfalls. WA had its warmest September on record. Homes around Perth have now been threatened 3 times by large fires. And the East Coast have been experiencing unusual high humidity over the summer period.
The lesson from this summer really is that things are becoming more chaotic and unpredictable and harder to foresee.
Climate justice is what we need. Today, young activists gathered at Parliament House demanding,
I'm calling on those in power to listen to youth voices.
The Greens pointing to loopholes in the laws.
Well, if you're serious about tackling climate change, then our laws must stop new coal and gas projects.
Labor's response.
The Greens political party and the crossbench negotiated with the government a safeguard mechanism.
Adding,
it's why, for example, we are investing in upgrading the predictive capacity of the Bureau of Meteorology.
What we expect in at least the 3 months ahead is probably wetter than average over the north and northeastern of Australia.
Severe heatwave warnings are in place for Western Australia. Madina Jafari, SBS World News.
Around 2 billion people across the world will usher in the Year of the Dragon this weekend. And here in Australia, there'll be some of the biggest Lunar New Year celebrations outside of Asia.
In Chinese tradition, the lion dance is believed to chase away evil spirits and bring good fortune. In Sydney today, spirits were high as the city began 16 days of celebrations for the Lunar New Year.
It's the Year of the Dragon, the most powerful zodiac of the Chinese mythology.
A symbol of strength and vitality set to grace the community.
It touches every business. If you see a lantern there, the dragon has visited.
Chinatown is the focus ahead of City Council plans to revitalise the historic precinct. A history celebrated by murals currently adorning the city's light rail.
A lot of the Chinese community settled in Chinatown, but through, of course, business and industry and stuff like that, and made home kind of here where work was.
Performances, dragon boat racing and, of course, food will mark the new year. And an art display that showcases the work of 22 children.
I like this dragon because it looks funny, and I like this style of dragon because it matches my personality.
Amid the cost of living crisis, Chinatown business owners say trade this year has been slow. Their wish for the Lunar New Year, more customers.
I hope the federal government can make all the people rich.
Volunteers and members of the Chinese community have pitched in to clean up Chinatown for the occasion.
My grandfather was part of the team that actually built the archway behind me. I kind of feel like I have a responsibility to preserve Chinatown as it is.
太原街是我很喜欢的一个地方，我小的时候经常来这里玩。
And at Parliament House in Canberra,
Happy New Year!
Politicians as well throwing a Lunar New Year party. Edwina Guinan, SBS World News.
And the SBS Lunar New Year page has everything you need to know to bring in the Year of the Dragon. That includes details of events that are happening right around Australia. China's financial markets regulator has been ousted as policymakers struggle to stabilise the country's share markets. His replacement has a reputation for tough action, and investors are closely watching to see whether the government's rescue plan will succeed.
Chinese stock prices are rebounding, with the country's blue-chip companies staging their biggest rally since 2022. Chinese technology company Alibaba was among the biggest gainers. It comes days after Chinese stock market valuations fell to 5-year lows last week. Behind the turnaround, government intervention. China's securities regulator vowed to take steps to crack down on what it described as malicious short selling and urged institutional investors to expand their investments. Some hedge funds and brokerages reported bans on selling. And a state fund dubbed the National Team also intervened, helping to stem a sell-off. But analysts say unless more is done to stimulate China's stagnating economic growth, government efforts could backfire.
The expectation is so weak. And that means even if temporarily, maybe the state can do something to push the stock market up, but that would cause more people to sell rather than to buy. So in the short term, actually, we have this high risk that the Chinese stock market will go down much further.
China's growth achieved last year's government target of 5%, but the International Monetary Fund predicts more problems to come for the world's second-largest economy. The property sector, a major driver of growth, is in decline, with no sign of recovery. China's volatile stock market is just one symptom of a widespread confidence crisis. The government has so far refused to implement any major effort to stimulate the economy, and many experts believe that until that happens, gains will be short-lived and pessimism about the country's future will remain.
That is Katrina Yu reporting there from Beijing. Well, Australia's second largest electricity and gas retailer has posted a bumper profit, which has supercharged its share price. SBS Finance editor Ricardo Gonçalves joins us now with more details. And Ricardo, this will not help public perception in the face of cost of living crises.
Yeah, Janice, AGL says milder weather and increased solar power has meant demand for electricity services actually fell in the 6 months to December, but that didn't stop its underlying profit surge 359% for the half year. Higher wholesale electricity prices, more stable market conditions and lower costs helped. Its CEO says he expects that positive momentum to continue, but adds he's conscious of the pressures some customers are facing.
We continue to proactively engage with customers who are experiencing cost of living pressures, providing customers with payment support and government grant assistance, and have commenced our program to deploy free solar for low-income households starting in South Australia. We're also partnering with specialised empathy training providers for our call centre and communication staff, delivering programs to improve First Nation customer accessibility and increasing financial counsellor coverage.
The latest ABS inflation report showed electricity prices rose nearly 6% since June last year, but had it not been for the energy bill relief rebates, that increase would have been closer to 18%. And the federal government, meanwhile, is handing out $41 million in energy efficiency grants for small and medium businesses to help reduce costs. The grants are for between $10,000 and $25,000 and can be used to upgrade to more efficient equipment. That includes things like better air conditioning units or gas heating boilers with heat pumps to help lower power bills and emissions. It's the second set of such grants being offered, adding to the $15.5 million in existing government funding handed out to nearly 700 Australian businesses. And on the share market, investors liked AGL's update, setting its shares more than 10% higher. It also reported progress in renewable energy transition. There was a mixed response to results from toll road operator Transurban and media company News Corporation, while realestate.com.au owner REA fell as the number of listings normalised.
Melbourne and Sydney are currently trending above the 6-year average, and then the other geographies are obviously therefore trending below the 6-year average, which is why the national numbers are kind of at.
Elsewhere, hearing implant maker Cochlear did well on a profit upgrade. IT was the best performing sector. The banks like the Commonwealth rose, but energy stocks like Santos fell. So, all up, the Australian share market rose today, the ASX 200 gaining 0.3%. The Australian dollar is a little weaker against the US compared with the same time yesterday and is down across most of the other major global currencies, including the Chinese yuan, where consumer prices are falling at the fastest pace in 15 years. China is struggling to shake off persistent deflation pressures, recording a 0.8% decline in inflation last month, which was worse than expected.
If you continue to have deflationary outcomes in China, the balance of risks here shifts to investors wanting to position for more and more stimulus. Authorities have already started to talk more stimulus. It's just that they're implementing it via supporting the stock market rather than the economy directly.
And as we heard earlier, China's main stock market, the Shanghai Composite Index, is recovering and is up more than 3% over the last 5 days. Last year's Optus network outage has sparked a surge in the number of complaints against phone and internet service providers. The telecommunications industry ombudsman received 13.4% more over the December quarter, including 919 complaints from Optus customers about the outage on the 8th of November, many small businesses. The number of financial hardship submissions fell, and that's despite higher living costs.
Look, it's great news that we can say that this quarter is down on the same time last year, but things can change very quickly and it requires constant focus to ensure you understand your customers' needs, understand your customers' expectations and respond quickly and fairly when people do raise a concern with you.
Other major complaints related to failures or delays in establishing connections, customer service issues and billing concerns. And with less than a week to go until Valentine's Day, people pursuing love online are being warned to avoid being broken-hearted by scammers because $40 million was lost to romance scams last year. The ACCC Scamwatch says people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds accounted for 30% of that, or around $12 million. And older Australians, those aged over 55, are disproportionately targeted and suffered the largest individual losses. So when it comes to money, Janice, I guess sometimes it's best to use your head and not your heart.
But where's the romance? Thanks, Ricardo. Coming up next, sending up Australian eyes to examine an extreme environment. Plus, South Africa's young guns star in a historic one-day victory against Australia. Let's head to Antarctica, a place where serene beauty coexists with some of the world's most extreme conditions. Now, Australian researchers are using drones to conduct targeted surveys in some of its most remote corners to learn more about the continent's extraordinary biodiversity.
On the surface, this barren horizon appears desolate. But here, an expedition is being led to explore previously undiscovered life in Antarctica.
Visiting these areas is really unique. They're very fragile, delicate sort of ecosystems. Life hangs in the balance in these areas because of the harshness of the environment.
Researchers from Queensland's University of Technology taking to the skies to reach areas even considered secluded in one of the most remote places on Earth. The mission operated out of the Casey Research Station, which is managed by the Australian Antarctic Division. Researchers surveying the biodiversity of the Bunga Hills area. It's one of the largest ice-free oases on the continent. Over 2 months spent in a field camp, the researchers harnessed drone technology to aid their work. Acoustic sensors also used to capture the environment's unique sounds.
It's probably the hardest environment that we've had to operate in. Some of the conditions are like high wind conditions, low temperatures.
Having this campaign allow us to gather really unique data.
The mission's targeted use of the technology for ecological research considered a world first in a habitat where new species like exotic mosses are still being discovered.
The surveys we're conducting are about ensuring the protection of these areas into the future in the face of emergent threats.
By understanding what's happening in Antarctica, what's happening with species responses to climate change, we can have a broader understanding of what's happening elsewhere in the planet.
Unravelling the mysteries of a resilient but still fragile ecosystem. Tom Stainer, SBS World News.
Host nation Qatar has celebrated reaching the final of the Asian Cup with a dramatic win against Iran this morning. Qatar winning a seesawing encounter 3-2 to line up a meeting with Jordan in Sunday's decider.
Qatar is looking to become the first team to win back-to-back Asian Cups since Japan did so at the turn of the century. Iran's Sada Azmoun put those plans on shaky ground with a superb overhead goal.
Azmoun, and what a goal that is!
The stadium erupted 13 minutes after that wonder goal when Jassem Gabba's deflected shot flew in.
Jassem Gabba's shot helped over Ali Reza Beiranvand by Izzatullah.
And just before the break, the home side hit the front.
Akram Afif, what a finish!
The intervention of the VAR official early in the second period handed Iran a lifeline, and Ali Reza Jambaksh coolly took the resulting penalty kick.
Things up, and it's back to 2-2.
But Iran's hopes of spoiling the home side's party evaporated inside the last 10 minutes when Al-Muiz Ali became the tournament's second highest ever goalscorer. His 11th Asian Cup strike sparking wild celebrations and sees him just 3 behind Iran's Ali Daei on the all-time list. 16 minutes of stoppage time was played before Qatar's place in Sunday's final against Jordan was confirmed. John Baldock, SBS World News.
There was joy too for Ivory Coast fans as their country reached the final of the Africa Cup of Nations. Sebastian Haller was the hero against the Democratic Republic of the Congo when his 65th minute strike proved the winner. The host nation meets Nigeria in Monday's final after the Super Eagles won their semi-final against South Africa in a penalty shootout. South Africa's women's team has beaten Australia in a one-day match for the first time to level the series. Marizanne Kapp top scored with 75 runs and took 3 wickets in the 84-run victory. But it was 2 rookie quicks, Elise Murray-Marks and Ayana Hlubi, who also captured attention. They took 2 wickets each and showed there's plenty of life in the multi-format series with 2 games remaining.
They've been enjoying every moment here. They've been working really hard on the nets, and I'm happy they got an opportunity now. And yeah, like I said, we got a small group as well, so I'm a younger group. So it's nice to have these girls coming in and taking big wickets.
Marks's second wicket broke the dangerous partnership between Ashley Gardner and Kim Garth that had kept Australia in the match. Well, ahead of Monday's NFL Super Bowl, it's been confirmed that the 20th annual Puppy Bowl will also be held. The 3-hour-long event will feature 131 puppies from right across 73 shelters. The Puppy Bowl aims to entertain but also encourage viewers to consider adopting the 4-legged players. Coming up, the weather details and how a little oversight has left a large headache for one community. To the weather forecast now in the major centres. Grey and partly cloudy in Sydney. The sun will be out in Canberra. Cloudy skies in Melbourne and Hobart. All clear in Adelaide and Perth, but it'll be hot there, set to reach 41 degrees. Showers and a possible storm ahead for Darwin, and wet weather on the way for Brisbane. Checking conditions further afield now. Thunderstorms ahead in Nundy. Partly cloudy in Noumea and in Wellington. To Southeast Asia now, grey and partly cloudy in Bangkok. A clear day for Phnom Penh, unsettled and thundery in Singapore. Let's head further north. Fine weather for Beijing, partly cloudy in Tokyo, drizzle in Taipei, partly cloudy in Hong Kong. Heading west, all clear in Beirut, partly cloudy in Jerusalem, foggy in New Delhi. To Europe now, cold and snowing in Stockholm, drizzle in Berlin, rain in London, fine for Paris, rain to hit Madrid and Rome, and fine in Athens. To Africa now, a rainy day ahead for Algiers and Casablanca, mostly sunny in Dakar, foggy in Lagos, partly cloudy in Nairobi. In South America, wet and rainy in Caracas, partly cloudy in Bogota, and thunderstorms in Asuncion. And for North America, showers to hit Toronto, cloudy skies in New York, fine in Miami, partly cloudy in Havana. Well, now to a case of a mistaken street address that's left a giant headache for one community in the English Midlands. But the council which made the area says it's all legal and they can't undo it.
This is the view from Georgie Wallace's back garden, a cathedral of steel just several feet away, and once constructed, looks like it could become some sort of warehouse. This is what her back garden used to look like. Today, she is living next to a building site.
It's just enormous, and it's a monstrosity. I mean, it just feels like it's gone up overnight. It's there. It's so invasive. You know, loss of privacy, loss of light. You know, how can I come out the weekends, enjoy my garden in the summer when I've got this to look at?
What's annoyed many of the residents here is a mistake in the planning consultation process. This used to be the site of a Weetabix factory. It turns out letters about the planning application were sent to residents on a different road, half a mile away, where another Weetabix factory is situated. That has infuriated people who live here, and North Northamptonshire Council has apologised, but says planning permission remains lawful. The council says because a notice was placed at the site and a press advert was published, it fulfills the statutory part of the process.
I think it's a shambles. They haven't actually contacted the correct street that they were supposed to have contacted and contacted another one. So I feel like they haven't specifically done what they were supposed to have done in order to build this.
The council says it's doing all it can to ensure a similar issue doesn't happen again, but people living here feel like they have been forgotten.
Joe Black reporting there. Well, that is the world this Thursday. Claudia Farhart will be back with our next bulletin. That's at 10:45 tonight, but we're going to leave you tonight with a flashback. 60 years ago, the Beatles arrived as screaming fans in their first US tour. For now, from the World News team, good night.